Symbolic History Through Sight and Sound, 35, Between Wars, 20th Century Art and Politics.
Bist du nicht mit deinen Gaben jetzt und schon vor meiner Tür? Ja, du klopfest.
Begin with the style plateau of Europe. Rembrandt, 1656, Jacob blessing the sons of Joseph. In the century of Descartes and Newton. In music, this Albert. When rational science, chordal harmony, representational art seemed to constitute a divine order. Henry Moore. That spiritual object which we call space represents for us the true and universal nature of the continuous divine presence. From this 1882 group portrait, through the First World War, Sargent kept up the grand manner of figures lighted in space. But against Rembrandt or Velasquez, these daughters of Bois in their Paris drawing room, with the music of Hugo Wolf, seem as spaced out as the children of Henry James. When a reality which once affirmed God and world has become so spectral, how is it to be maintained? All during Sargent's lifetime and in all arts, Varese's double-edged clang of Amérique, 1922, the converse wave had been mounting through Cézanne, post-impressionist, Fauve, to the dissolving ecstasy of luminism, Blauer Reiter, futurism, this 1915 Severini left, where an armored train slides into rapture. And when Picasso, right, in the throes of a Europe bungling through fascism to second war, struck back, it was not by realism, but by the cleaver of post-Dada attack, This Girl with a Cock of 1938. Though establishment, even into nightmare times, resisted modernism, whether of yea or nay, as if it sabotaged old claims, this 1913 Boccioni left unique form of continuity in space. No wonder, as the free enterprise flivver went into depression shimmies and mass cults took over Mussolini, Stalin, Hitler, the milder New Deal, they backed art reaffirmation of nature and man. This 1935 Kolbe, great fighter, right, damns the whole Boccioni experiment. Yet how like, in that willful assertion, which pushed with futurists toward the First, with fascists toward the Second World War. Must not both wear, like a shadow, some hollow man's suppressed anemia? Here we go round the prickly pear at 5 o'clock in the morning. For there was a euphoria from revolution through romantic, symbolist, modern, which it was always possible by temperament, drink, or Pascalian vertigo to slip off of. Hindemith from 1922. So alcoholic Utrillo's pre-war Paris clouds the fauve bright scene, like the Boston of Eliot's Prufrock. Streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious intent to lead you to an overwhelming question. Oh, do not ask what is it, let us go and make our visit. Modigliani, too, by addiction and consumption, fell beyond Picasso's blue and rose into the enervations of that lady whose portrait pound, your mind and you are our Sargasso Sea, and she is dying piecemeal of a sort of emotional anemia, would turn over to Eliot, eyes that fix you in a formulated phrase, and I shall sit here, serving tea to friends. Kandinsky's early elation left had turned foreseen destruction to a symbolist Sieg Heil. This 1913 improvisation with firing cannon and toppling materialist towers. But Kandinsky himself, after Versailles, all those little doomed democracies carved for exploitation out of defeated empires, Kandinsky, right, tightened inebriation to a geometric aftermath, while the climax movement of the same 1922 Hindemith, straitjackets pre-war iconoclasm. Such the foreboding drumbeat Hofer in 1920 Berlin would bring from Cubism and the blood depletion of war. Again, Eliot had penetrated to that skeletal mood in 1911 Paris, Rhapsody on a Windy Night. Every street lamp that I pass beats like a fatalistic drum, the last twist of the knife. In The Wasteland, Eliot seems to have foreshadowed also the Dali Smart Surreal, this 1935 nostalgic echo, with its bell clapper woman and skip roping inversion. A woman drew her long black hair out tight and fiddled whisper music on those strings, and bats with baby faces in the violet light whistled and beat their wings and crawled head downward down a blackened wall, and upside down in air were towers tolling reminiscent bells that kept the hours, and voices singing out of empty cisterns and exhausted wells. As for Dali, after Spain and Paris, he was now sharing in the continental fruitcake of America, everything from Rock of Gibraltar East to the zaniest shenanigans of Hollywood, this Mack Sennett 1917 Bathing Beauties. And what is Santa going to give those girls anyway? A bag of diapers? Yet the East, too, was pulsing with the vibrance of capital, expanding as never before toward boom and bust. Staid insurance companies housing Ives and Wallace Stevens, while John Marin caught this 1922 Lower Manhattan, the sun going off like an atomic bomb at the heart of it. Such affirmation as William Carlos Williams risked in his 1917 El Hombre. It's a strange courage you give me, ancient star. Shine alone in the sunrise, toward which you lend no part. While incalculable fortunes rose and deployed themselves, not yet for the modern, but in the acquisition and pastiche display of Gothic, Renaissance, Baroque. Beside the ornate refinement of Inigo Jones' mid-17th century double cube room, Wilton House near Salisbury, left. How eclectic the ostentation of the assembly room at San Simeon, where William Randolph Hearst sat at the hub of a tabloid empire to receive his guests. Did the infinitely varied surge and intemperance of that America admit of any limits at all? By will or fate, we had subsumed everything the conquering West had dreamed or brought off against what was not yet called the Third World. This reception of the first British administrator in Ekiti, Nigeria. Captain Ambrose, like a sick bird, with his shackled barrows, confronting the Yoruba chief with his wives and elders. but would not Kurtz, meteoring down to the heart of darkness, symbolize the reverse conquest of beat rhythm, seeding new world and old with reckless revitalization? These indomitable blacks jitterbugging to a jukebox in Clarksdale, Mississippi, 1939. Why not to Duke Ellington's Battle of Swing, lately the rage of Paris?
Oh, I just can't keep from crying sometimes. No, I just can't keep from crying sometimes. With my heart full of sorrow.
As in all post-Nietzschean modern, that wild release transvalues the caustic betrayal of enlightened and romantic hope. This 1937 photograph is entitled At the Time of the Louisville Flood, but the seeking blacks against the slogan sail of the American way might project from any depression city the job or soup lines of a crazed economy, everywhere veering toward violence.
I just can't keep from crying sometimes.
I was in Florence during Hitler's 1938 visit. The Italians hated the Germans, but welcome signs plastered the walls. From windows not to be raised above 5 centimeters, we saw the great car pass between banks of soldiers, the Duce and Führer side by side, one acting for the crowd, the other for his own romantic heart. On every lamppost, loudspeakers had been hung, from which, to offset Italians shouting for Mussolini, volleyed a raucous Heil Hitler! Heil Hitler! The corporal waved acceptance. As the car passed, the real cry eased, while the record-rehearsing megaphones boomed, Heil Hitler! Heil Hitler! Ad absurdum. Italian cleverness. But who was being deceived? From that vortex beyond the human, of which Chaplin would make fun and history destruction, the arts, the races, banned as degenerate, this Hoffmann color fantasia of 1943, with its stressed discoveries of pure push and pull, force and counterforce, Schoenberg's 1936 12-tone fourth quartet, the very sciences of relativity and indeterminacy, also accused of decadence, these regrouped in America for a love feast of modernity, euphoric transvaluation of earth upheaval. Had what was exiled constituted a kind of drunken boat danger, or search through danger for radical renewal? Or was it the protraction of a now fashionable mode? Could it be all in one? Eternity, said Bernard of Tours, called Sylvestris, is that from which time must be born and into which it must be resolved. But not all our art stripping could revive the force with which spirit first buttressed over the bare fifth voids of Romanesque, the almost demonic stare of body overmastered by God's word. Nor our sensuous cultivation, our fullness of techniques and knowledge, restore the sanctifying order of earth and man, which the 1700s rhetoric of Baroque, here Dietrich and Bach, tirelessly proclaims. In conscious disclaimer of that plenitude, Rouault's simulation of stained glass or this close of Satie's Socrate does not resume the clean force of the pre-personal. Its soil is broken romantic. Eliot's 1911-12 Proofrock, I am no prophet, and here's no great matter. A debility perfected by 1925 in The Hollow Man. We are the stuffed men, leaning together, headpiece filled with straw, alas, waking alone at the hour when we are trembling with tenderness, lips that would kiss, form prayers to broken stone. Between this broken jaw of our lost kingdoms and faith falls the shadow. Life is very long, for thine is. Life is, for thine is the... This is the way the world ends, not with a bang, but a whimper. Had the spirit and exuberance of the past worn down to Eliot's neo-skeptic return to high church and state? By 1916, cliques of Americans had turned, with Gertrude Stein, to clever or pained debunking. If Man Ray and Schomburg carried it with the wit of Dada, poor Maurer left, who sacrificed impressionist success to the cubism of Paris, gave that reduction a melancholy of his own. This George Washington of 1932, year of the artist's suicide, appropriate to a time of crash and depression, that such anemia on the abstract side should be countered on the realist by Grant Wood's 1930 American Gothic, right, its make-believe of pitchfork father and spinster daughter ironically aproned in circles and dots, prime for Eliot's slide through the wasteland. I think we are in Rat's Alley, where the dead men lost their bones, to the dry conversion of Ash Wednesday, also 1930. Although I do not hope to turn again, although I do not hope, wavering between the profit and the loss. Yet in the realistic fiction of that horizon, Mississippi Faulkner could sweep the impenetrable gloom of the sound and the fury, Absalom, wild palms, on an affirming thunderhead of hallucinated prose. Because if memory exists outside of the flesh, it won't be memory because it won't know what it remembers. So when she became not, then half of memory became not. And if I become not, then all of remembering will cease to be. Yes, he thought, between grief and nothing, I will take grief. Murray Hull, Mississippi painter, to be caught up later in the excitement of the New York school, is no art equivalent, though this portrait from the Depression of an American citizen, another Washington, has the stamp of Faulkner's indomitable blacks. In Dilsey's church, the monkey-like preacher with the great voice. Oh, brethren, I sees the doom crack, and hears the golden horns shouting down to glory, and the arisen dead what got the blood and the recollection of the Lamb. West of the Black Sway, Jeffers attempted a Dionysiac crucible of terror. He brays humanity in a mortar to bring the savor from the bruised root. I have seen these ways of God, unmeasured power, incredible passion, enormous craft, a certain measure in phenomena, the fountains of the boiling stars, the flowers on the foreland, the ever-returning roses of dawn. As if three pockets of the English-speaking world had approached tragic resonance, Jeffers' Carmel Coast, Faulkner's Mississippi, and, above the rest, the Ireland of William Butler Yeats. Yet these were word-kindlings, loosely linked to any art stirrings from the same or other soil, as from Seattle, Graves, 1940, Blind Bird. Who is greater than Frank Lloyd Wright? Yet he defies the tragic. Can even his masterpiece, this 1936 house, cantilevered over falling water, lift the ruins of time to an eternal sphere, where all presences abide? It is what Yeats does in poems of those years, The Curse of Cromwell. I came on a great house in middle of the night, its open lighted doorway and its windows all alight, and all my friends were there and made me welcome too. But I woke in an old ruin that the winds howled through. and when I pay attention, I must out and walk among the dogs and horses that understand my talk. Oh, what of that? Oh, what of that? What is there left to say? Begin again. Can we typify the style current of the first third of the century? Mondrian would move in 20 years from this 1902 Dutch landscape to a ruled abstraction of white and primary color squares. In the comparable break with tonal harmony, Debussy, up to 1890, was refining French Romantic toward musical impressionism, while art sought an abstract color music. Yet what of the ratios on which music had relied? The ear knows them by wave overlay, but seeing blurs proportion, whether of space or color frequency. No wonder visual harmony has mostly stretched representation. In this 1906 Mondrian, from 4 years later than the first, landscape feels its way toward geometry. In 6 more years, Mondrian climaxes that search for the form underlay of nature. Indeed, the background of this horizontal tree already admits the cubism of Paris. With Debussy, a comparable span might take us to the Gamelin-inspired pagodas of 1903. Almost within a year, Mondrian had dissolved the espaliered tree with other natural objects into a complex of straight and curved lines, forming planes of blue and tan, for which the title now can only be composition. It is the pre-war climax of abstract experiment. Debussy did not live into the reductive tightening of the post-war 20s, in which from 1921 to 33, Mondrian held to a canon of perpendicular black lines, ruled on white and edged with primary color rectangles. Though Debussy's last studies, the Etudes of 1915, move that way. Is Mondrian's abstract stripping the mainstream of the time? And what is its content? Before I knew William Carlos Williams, I cited his Between Walls for such indirection. Between walls, the black wings of the hospital where nothing will grow lie cinders, in which shine the broken pieces of a green bottle. Though when I asked him afterwards if that shattered glass spoke mere fragmentation or the outcrop of beauty even from the sterile, he who hated to explain poetry groaned, "I meant the latter." So Mondrian in New York, 1943, brought the vibrance of what he now called boogie-woogie to this final unfinished diamond entitled Victory Boogie-Woogie. We cannot deny the trend of reattachment. Duncan Grant, born in India, trained in Paris, painter of the Bloomsbury group, might seem at first drawn to the abstract, into the Edwardian realism of this 1910 portrait of James Strachey, secure in its heritage from Pre-Raphaelite and Degas. He has absorbed in this still life of 1912 Cézanne. Perhaps the early work of Vaughan Williams, as from the London Symphony, finished in 1914, has some such blend of romantic and modern, expressed in a richly personal idiom. But Grant, the next year, under the tutelage especially of Matisse, ventured further into the modern experiment than Vaughan Williams perhaps ever would. Surely the painter's admirers must have thought him launched into the proper orbit of the century. After the First War, however, he made an about-face and gave the rest of his life to a modern reconstitution of the realistic English landscape. It was the sort of affirmation Vaughan Williams aimed at in the Fifth Symphony shift to E major. How crucial is that earth rallying to the decades of between war? Even Wyndham Lewis, Blast and Tyro of English avant-garde, would move from the vorticist iconoclasm of his 1912-14 compositions to the representational portraits of the 30s, this in red, a haunted recording of the very aesthetic anemia, the very people his pen was satirizing in the apes of God. What of Picasso, style maker of the century, with the only musician who rivaled his art surprises? As Hugo Leichtentritt wrote, there is not one Stravinsky, there are 10. Picasso leads the way. This Harlequin anticipation of blue and rose is from 1901, whereas the earliest Stravinsky cognate seems the 1907 Pastorale, here in a later setting for violin and wind quartet. Picasso's eruption of force advances from 1906 to 9, through the Negroid to the violent beginnings of Cubism. Stravinsky peaks his upheaval a few years later in The Rite of Spring.